getting back to the whole politics thing, there are biblical principles that are taught. And so when you think about your Colossians and your Ephesians, and it talks about how servants or slave masters obey your masters. People take offense to those Bible verses because they think about slavery, but in reality, whether I'm in politics, whether I'm in the military, or whether I work wherever else, it is my duty to God to honor my boss or my leader. But then it also say, hey, leaders, remember, I'm your God and you answer to me. So if I'm in politics as a Christian, then one, whoever's over me, it's godly for me to be under their leadership. And then if I'm over people, I got to remember that I'm going to have to answer to God. So that goes to your question of are we actually doing a great commission in politics, right? Or who I vote for. The Bible say all things we do it for glory, we do it for God, right? And so if I'm voting, I should be praying, I should be looking at biblical wisdom, and I should be making a decision on who I vote for based off of that. I don't know that God, I know that God can, and maybe sometimes do say, this is the person I want you to vote for. But here's a conversation I think a lot of Christians need to start having. God may actually tell you to vote for somebody who don't fall in line with him. God have used kings and leaders who are not Christians, who do not serve him, who do not follow him. That whole writing on the wall thing, right? That God end up confessing that the God of Israel is the true God eventually. But a lot of people who are used by God, the religious people will say they're not actually Christians, right? Or they are not serving God. Like Paul, when he was Saul, he thought he was honoring God in what he was doing. And oh, by the way, that was also political, right? Because of the way their structure was set up back then. A lot of the Romans had the political leadership, but then the Jewish people, the way their religion was set up, it was also involved in politics. So when you start talking about the new early Christians, the reason why they wasn't really necessarily involved in politics was because at that time they were like the rebels. They were actually going against the way in the political system. Now, does that mean God wanted to be that way forever? I don't think so. I think it had to be that way for the gospel to get out because things had to change. And so now that things have changed, now we got to look at biblical wisdom on how do we operate in the space that we're in now. So now, back then, they wasn't voting like that. They didn't have the political system that we have. So now as Christians, how do I look at biblical wisdom and go from there? And then the next thing I'll say is, if God told you to do it, that doesn't necessarily mean he's telling other people to do the same thing too, because he works everything out for his good. So what God have going on in my life may be completely different of what's going on in somebody else's life. And so I believe that God can, will, and has put people who are not his followers in leadership positions because he know that this is going to work out a certain way for his glory. And we as humans, that may be a tough pill to swallow, that may be hard to understand, but that's just the reality. And one of the issues I have when people saying God told me this and God said that, and this is one of the reasons why I think things are hot right now. Because if you remember when President Trump was first in and he was going for a second term, there was a lot of prophecies of he's going to get a second term. So when he didn't win, then it was a lot of talk. So if you all are false prophets and you all are wrong, well, now that he got a second chance, all these prophets are like, nope, well, maybe the timing was off. Now the prophecy is about to happen. And see, that's the problem when you say God said. You better make sure God actually said it. Because if God didn't say it, now you're giving Christianity a bad name.